and welcome to another edition of Israeli Frenemies here in the heart of Tel Aviv from the ILTV studio. My name is Josh Haston. I'm a freelance journalist, also a radio host here in Israel. With me today is Jacob Ner David. He's a member of the International Council of the New Israel Fund. Jacob, let's get right to it. So our top story here today on Israeli Frenemies is Airbnb. Airbnb, the real estate or rental platform, they came out with a statement this week deciding that they would no longer list over 200 properties in Judea and Samaria. They claim to be open and available for everyone apparently, except besides Jews who call Judea and Samaria their home. I think this is preposterous. I think this is discrimination. And I think they should reverse their decision. I hope the other companies that also rent in Judea and Samaria do not follow their lead. And I know people are talking about legal action against Airbnb and all sorts of action. But at the end of the day, Jacob, what they're really actually doing is they're helping the residents of Judea and Samaria to market their properties. I know for a fact that a lot of people now are actually deliberately coming to Judea and Samaria over the last couple of days looking to rent apartments, rent vacation weekend getaway homes. So I think this is going to backfire on them.
It was the best promo as you said, for people with homes in Yehuda v'Shomron, in Judea and Samaria. I think that we have to look at exactly what they were talking about. They're talking about Israeli settlements, not Jews. And I think it's important to make the difference, that they are looking at it from a political framework, whether right, wrong, and we can debate it, but they certainly weren't targeting Jews.
Let's debate it, because I believe they were targeting Jews because, as you know, they didn't single out. If they have an issue with the conflict of Israeli policy in Judea and Samaria, they could decide, well, we're not going to allow people to rent anywhere in Judea and Samaria, whether you're an Arab, whether you're a Jew, whether you're a Christian. They decided we will not list Jewish-only properties.
No,
that is deliberately against Jews.
So they specifically said Israeli settlements, not Jewish-owned properties. Otherwise, I would agree with you. And if you look, they have respected the State of Israel's boundaries, meaning the State of Israel has declared way back when, in 1967, that all of Jerusalem in the municipal boundaries are part of the State of Israel. Airbnb respects that. They respect all the rest of the boundaries of the State of Israel. We have decided to keep these areas in limbo. Now, I think that is to our detriment, but we've decided for 50 years to keep these areas in limbo. So they are, yes, they're targeting Israeli settlements. Why aren't they targeting lots of other areas of conflict around the world? Well, for a variety of reasons. We know all the reasons. But that is the specific issue on the table, not targeting Jews, it's not targeting Israel. And in fact, by doing this, it's a slap in the face to BDS, because they're saying in the State of Israel, we completely support.
Well, the reason actually is a double standard here for Jews, again, living in Israel. And as you mentioned, all other land conflicts around the world, they have no problem allowing people to rent there. And it's ironic that we're talking about real estate here. I mean, if you are living under the Palestinian Authority and you decide, for example, to sell property to Jews, as was the case this week, it was in the news, several Arabs just received a very stiff prison sentence, 15 years plus hard labor for selling property to Jews. Now, why wouldn't Airbnb go after those who are willing to, put their own people in prison over issues dealing with real estate?
Airbnb, as you know, allows people to rent in all kinds of places in the world which have terrible human rights records. So we're not getting into that. And I do believe that Airbnb should have stayed away from politics in general. So I'm not saying that I support the decision of Airbnb as a private company. I think if they're going to get into politics, they need to take a deep breath and get into politics. But they haven't done that. For whatever reason, they decided to start here. Having said all that, though, if you look at all the other areas, which everybody in Facebook over the past 2 days have loved to cite, all these other areas, they're all other areas that have been annexed by the conquering power. Again, we have decided to leave these properties, to leave Judea and Samaria in limbo for 50 years. I say shame on us. that we've done this for 50 years.
I'll actually
that's
agree
the
with
issue.
you. I'll agree with you there because I think it's about time for Israel to formally annex Judea and Samaria after all this time. I think that was a huge mistake since the '67 war. But if you look at those countries on that list, you know, Saudi Arabia, on and on and on throughout the Middle East, Jews cannot rent anywhere in those countries. No chance that you can enter many of those countries. And that's, I think, there's a major problem with Airbnb, the hypocrisy and the singling out of this issue. And I think we might agree somewhat on that.
People love to single out Israel. I actually like that. And everyone talks about a double standard. And I say, thank God for the double standard. Oy vavoy if they compare us to Saudi Arabia, to Syria, and so on. I don't want to be compared to those countries. I want to be held to a higher standard, and I held myself to a higher standard. So I really don't care what's going on in Crimea and the Ukraine and in this area and that area. I don't want to be compared to Russia, to Syria, to Saudi Arabia, definitely not to Saudi Arabia. Again, why did they single out Israel? We know the reasons. There are lobbying forces, we're under a microscope, and people do hold Israel to a higher standard.
Well, that's actually discrimination if you hold Israel to a different standard, and it's actually racism against those other countries. It's saying that those people aren't good enough to hold a certain standard, and that's why I find it disturbing. But as I said, to start the discussion,
completely agree with that.
At the end of the day, this is just going to help. People are out there. Trust me. I saw it today before I came over. More and more people asking to rent in Judea and Samaria. So this is a strategic mistake, and I think that this is going to be a legal battle as we go forward. I know some of the parties involved who are going after Airbnb from a legal perspective because of this discrimination. Right. So I think it was a horrible move by that company.
On the other hand, our current government, right, which is by no means a government that can be said to be a left-wing government.
I think that the gap between the Palestinians and the Israelis is much too big in order to be bridged. I think personally it's a waste of time.
So the clip you just saw was our Justice Minister Ayelet Shaked from the Jewish Home Party speaking at yesterday's Jerusalem Post conference in Jerusalem. And she essentially sent a message to the Trump administration saying the Israelis and the Arabs, the Palestinians, are so far apart on the issues of peace, so let's not even introduce any plan, because she believes any plan which they introduce is destined to fail. Now, why is this so relevant? Up until now, the Netanyahu government has essentially been in line with the Trump administration. Things have been hunky-dory between the two sides. And now here you have one of our top ministers saying publicly to the Trump administration, don't even introduce a plan. Now, we don't know what that plan is. There have been rumors, there have been leaks. Nobody actually knows what is in the plan. Nevertheless, Justice Minister Shaked, who knows if this will be a firestorm because of her comments. What do you think about her statements? And do you think that this is going to create a bigger issue or a rift, perhaps, between the wonderful relationship that our government has with the Americans at this time?
Right. Well, first of all, we have to keep in mind that Minister Shaked, while a member of the current government, from a political point of view, represents a relatively small slice of the Israeli population. And so she shouldn't speak on behalf of the Israeli people when she speaks. She can certainly speak, if she wants to, on behalf of the current coalition, if the coalition allows her to. However, in terms of what she said, and I think what will happen with the Trump administration, when she talks about a waste of time, the Trump administration, and we know the people who are involved, right? It's Ambassador Friedman, it's Jared Kushner, Jason Greenblatt. If she feels they were wasting their time, she should have said that 2 years ago. She allowed them to spend 2 years in intense work trying to get somewhere and trying to move the ball forward. If she believes the ball can't be moved forward, then she should have said that 2 years ago.
See, so I agree with her statements, because I do believe that it is a waste of time to embark on any peace plan, especially now. I mean, we've been going down this path now. If you take the Oslo Accords 25 years ago, we've been going down this path. It's only led to the death of 1,600 Israelis, whether in terror attacks or whether in wars or whatnot. So I agree with her, but I still hesitate in order, you know, when we're talking about accepting the fact that she said this publicly, said this in a forum where she doesn't know, unless she does know and she's not saying anything. But as far as I know, I actually interviewed Jason Greenblatt a couple months ago, and he said nobody knows what's in this plan. It's classified, top secret. Israelis, Americans, nobody actually knows what the plan is. So Is she perhaps making a mistake? It's possible to say that maybe she made a mistake by saying this publicly, going against, even if she does represent just the Jewish Home Party, she is our Justice Minister. So it could be a mistake that she said this publicly.
Oh, it was
and we'll see what Donald Trump and his team say down the road.
It was definitely a mistake. And also in terms of our current government, if you look at what our Prime Minister has said repeatedly over his now almost 10 years as Prime Minister, he doesn't agree with her. And he has invested a lot of his own time in various efforts to try and move the ball forward, to try and move closer to some sort of long-term arrangement, whether it's vis-a-vis Yehuda v'Shomron or in other areas. So I don't think the Prime Minister himself agrees with her.
But what do you, the statement itself, which she said, which I do agree with, that we are nowhere near any type of deal. I mean, I think she's spot on when it comes to that. I mean, with the incitement on a daily basis in the Palestinian Authority, Hamas in Gaza, I don't see any plan, any point to any plan at this point.
I think she's spot off, not spot on.
Okay.
I think we have to look at things separately, whether it's Hamas as a movement, and you have to look at them separately as their political side and their military side. But if we're talking about the vast majority of Palestinians, and I believe the majority of Israelis, if the right people were talking to each other and if they were allowed to move forward, in other words, not coalition governments that are going to fall any second, or perhaps on the other side, threats of assassination or who knows what. But if there was an actual government on both sides and leadership on both sides that can make bold moves, then I think there is something to be done. And I believe the majority of Israelis and majority of Palestinians feel that way, so even now.
A statistic just came out today which indicated that a very, very low percentage of Israelis are actually now in favor of a two-state solution after years and years of Mahmoud Abbas, as we see here, and his anti-Semitic rhetoric, his Holocaust denial, his incitement in the daily news and textbooks and all that. I think Israelis are waking up to the fact that he's not a true partner for peace, despite what Tzipi Livni said yesterday, saying that we need to strengthen the Palestinian Authority. I disagree with that entirely. I think the Palestinian Authority, in my opinion, has to go after all this time. We know who they are. We certainly know who Hamas is. And as long as as I tell people all the time, as long as the next generation of Arab children grow up thinking that Jews are the sons of monkeys and pigs, as they're taught in their school books and in their texts,
right,
I don't think we'll have any peace here in the near future.
I completely agree that we should not have allowed, as successive Israeli governments have allowed, all kinds of hate speech and hate education to take place. We should definitely not have allowed that. Completely agree, and we shouldn't allow it to happen here either. Unfortunately, we allow lots of stuff like that to take place, even in areas where it's completely within our control, like in Jerusalem. We have now, for a good 50 years, been in control of Jerusalem, and we have not done much in East Jerusalem in any way, shape, or form to truly integrate it. But I think in terms of what you're talking about with a two-state solution or not a two-state solution, I think you need to not just say what you're opposed to. I think you need to say, okay, so then what? So, for example, Naftali Bennett, as recently as a year ago, publicly described a situation which sounded like a two-state solution. He calls it something else, but it sounds a lot like a two-state solution. So, you know, if Minister Shaked doesn't like the Trump peace plan, whether she knows what's in it or doesn't know what's in it, so what's her plan for moving forward? If her plan is status quo, we're just going to stay like this in limbo for another 50 years, that's not much of a plan.
There's a lot of plans out there that I know of personally, at least 5 or 6 different plans. If we had more time, we could talk about it today. But I know one plan that I don't think we should take, and that's the plan of suicide. And in my opinion, a two-state solution is suicide. For the Jews here in the land of Israel, I think the country can be divided up. I was just looking at the mountains here, staring at the window here in Tel Aviv, and you can see Judea and Samaria from up above. Imagine if Hamas or any other terror group had control of those hills.
Now we're talking about a security situation, and we can line up generals on this side and generals on that side, and we can have a security debate. Neither of us are generals, so we're not going to have the security debate.
Yeah, well, we'll see what happens.
And currently there are more generals saying that there is a possibility to move forward.
There's also politics involved in their statements. They'd also have political ambitions by making those statements, and I don't subscribe to it. So a lot in the world of politics here in Israel. We had, of course, last week Hamas shooting 460 rockets at Jewish communities. Immediately after that stopped, our defense minister, Avigdor Lieberman, resigned from his position as defense minister. Prime Minister Netanyahu then assumed that portfolio, along with the other portfolios he has. It seems like he has very busy days. I know he doesn't sleep too much, but what we are left with practically is a coalition of 61 members of Knesset. Now, that is a razor-thin majority. You have to have over 60 in order to have a majority. So the question is, it appears at this point, today, we are not going towards early elections, which mean the elections would be held in November of 2019. But you never know here in Israel when a government can fall. If there are important votes in the Knesset, if they don't go the right way, the prime minister then could call for early elections. It looks like some of the other parties have backed off, Naftali Bennett's party and others. But this razor-thin majority, I mean, the question is, can this coalition govern? Can we govern here? I'll ask you, Jacob. Can we move forward, make any progress in the Knesset with a 61-seat majority? I think it's very difficult.
I think it's very difficult as well, especially when certain factions, as you mentioned, of the current coalition, for example, the Jewish Home Party and the two ministers in the government from the Jewish Home Party, as recently as 2 or 3 days ago, were saying that they were going to be resigning and moving to elections. Now, all of a sudden, they're not resigning and they're back in, and all kinds of other things that they've said about the current prime minister and the current coalition government. On the other hand, you have a minister of the Interior who, once again, is on his way to indictment, Aryeh Deri, for once again the police recommending that he be indicted. This is not just a coalition government. This is at most, government that's going to survive another few weeks. Another months, I would be surprised. But so I think when we talk about Israel and Israel being strong and being able to do what it needs to do as a country, we're in an untenable situation right now. And I think the fact that Prime Minister Netanyahu did not call for elections is simply survival mode tactics.
Just so people understand, I mean, the other day there was a crucial vote in the Knesset, and you had MK Sharon Haskell from the Likud party, who was hospitalized, right, and even with the IV in her, exactly, she decided to go to the Knesset against doctor's orders because she wanted to cast her vote in whatever it was that was on the table. So, I mean, it appears, and when all those people who analyze the political situation, they say that the prime minister wanted to push it off as much as possible to distance the 460 rockets and his, in my opinion, weak response to Hamas as long as it can, so that way it's out of the conscience of people when they go to that ballot box. That's why he wanted to push it off, people say, to November. And the question is, you know, will he then go back on his original thought and decide to call early elections himself if he realizes this Knesset is, essentially null and void if they don't get anything done in the next couple of months? Right.
Minister Lieberman resigning as defense minister, seemingly because he was not satisfied with what the government was doing, specifically in Gaza. He just didn't expose to us what his actual plan was that the government didn't accept. In other words, if he was resigning because the government wasn't prepared to do X, Y, Z, what was X, Y, Z? We don't know. So what we do know is that Prime Minister Netanyahu, time and time again, has agreed to ceasefires with Hamas, has negotiated with Hamas, even though he says he doesn't negotiate with Hamas. He obviously repeatedly, through third parties, negotiates with Hamas. So as long as he's negotiating with Hamas, why don't we negotiate with Hamas, actually, and instead of all of these ceasefires and then going back to rockets and not us having to retaliate, why don't we actually get somewhere with Hamas? Same thing on other fronts. Prime Minister Netanyahu does not seem to have an actual plan forward in many areas. And again, his coalition is 61. No matter what he does, it's going to fall apart.
No, I agree with you. There's a lot of kicking the can down the road it seems like that in terms of the current policies of this administration. I mean, he's been the prime minister for a long time, and in my personal opinion, he's done a lot of good. But on the other hand, some of these major issues, it seems like, as I said, it seems like he's been pushing it off as long as he can. Defense Minister Lieberman, he claimed that he resigned because Israel wasn't strong enough on Hamas, but then he's the same person who said that if he became defense minister, and that video went viral again on social media, that he would kill, assassinate, take out the head of Hamas within 48 hours, and he didn't do so. So I don't know what plan he had. But again, we're talking, what I find disturbing, though, is how quick we can go. And I was just in the South visiting with some of the kids down there 2 days ago, how we can go from 460 rockets, immediately shift over to the politics of the whole issue. And that's really what bothers me, as the people down there, the kids, they don't even have PTSD. because there's no post. It's always another threat of rocket fire. So I think we have to be strong against Hamas. I don't think we should talk to them ever. I understand they're in control, but people forget that they're an Islamic terror organization that blew up buses on a daily basis here when I met Aliyah in 2002 in cafes and whatnot. And all of a sudden they're sitting pretty as if they should have a meaningful role in any of this. I think they should be marginalized, and a lot more than that. A lot more. We don't have all the time in the world for my whole plan on how to deal with Gaza, but stay tuned for that.
Look, I think our situation, again, going back to the idea of limbo, we have left Gaza in limbo. Yes, we did it partly out of reaction to what happened in Gaza when we left Gaza, and I don't think a unilateral move was a good idea, but it was a choice taken by the Sharon government. We pulled out. They then started doing what they started doing. We then retaliated, and we've been in this limbo period ever since. So I don't believe that limbo is good. I don't believe vacuum is good. And I think that's the situation that we're facing as well, and we will face even more.
So this week in the United States is the holiday of Thanksgiving. And even though we're here in Israel and it's on Thanksgiving, it's just another day, it's just another work day. You don't feel it in any way, shape, or form that you do in the U.S. I still think we should express our thanks. We should be thankful for this wonderful Jewish state of Israel that we have. We should be thankful for all the good in this country. We debate the issues here on Israeli Frenemies, and some might get the perception that everything is doom and gloom around here. So let's be thankful that we have such a wonderful country, a wonderful land, a wonderful army that protects us 24/7. Let's be thankful this week of Thanksgiving. That is my good word for this week.
I couldn't agree more. I think that sometimes we forget how good we have it. With all of our problems, we forget how good we have it, and we have to recognize how good we have it and our responsibility to keep the good in us and to spread that good around the world. So we're in agreement there.
Amen to that, and to all the viewers out there, wishing you a wonderful week. If you're celebrating Thanksgiving this week, happy Thanksgiving from all of us at Israeli Frenemies and here at ILTV. Shalom, shalom from beautiful Tel Aviv. Have a wonderful week. We'll see you next time.